Hello, I'm Steve Chancellor from Second Look Training and Forensic Consulting. Welcome to another edition of A Few Minutes with Detectives. Today we had a very interesting question that came up during a recent training class that we were giving. And one of the students in a break came up and said, hey, how did you develop your expertise when you teach the staged crime scenes or the death or the sex crimes? And I think what they were looking for is, some way to kind of guide them to develop their own expertise. It's really not rocket science. I mean, it's pretty simple. First, I set about in my career very early on that I wanted to get into criminal investigations. I had a genuine desire to work on what I called the intelligent end of the business. I spent several years in uniform and responding, traffic tickets, and I responded to domestics, and I responded to initial complaints. But it was kind of unfulfilling for me personally, because when I would go to these scenes, I always wonder, where would I go from here? Or at court, to me, it was always, how did they figure this out? And that to me was the biggest driving force. What I told the student is, listen, if you set yourself that this is what you want to do, then you can develop your own expertise. So how do you develop your own expertise? Well, what I suggested is you take every training course that you possibly can. This is not always practical, but you try to take as many training courses as you can. Even if it's the same type of training but it's given by a second person, I always tried to attend, because every single time I went to any type of training, I always learned something. Now sometimes I didn't necessarily learn a different technique, but what I may have learned was not to do something. Okay, I wasn't really happy with what they were teaching me, so in my head I thought, okay, I'm not going to do it that way. I don't think that would work. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and one of the things I always used to tell my agents when I was their first line supervisor, listen, get into the books, either by textbooks, or in this day and age we have the internet. Look at all the research that you can do sitting at your own little home computer. Okay. And what I used to do when I was a young agent, and I would get the professional magazines, and I would see an article over some technique or some new concept, I would cut it out, or I would make a copy of it, and then I would keep it, so I could go back and refer to it. Back in the early 90s, I got to where I was putting them in binders, and each binder had a different type of information in it. When I finally left the state of Mississippi, I actually had about 35 binders that were chock full of articles that I had picked up over my 20 years prior to that. This day and age, you don't have to do that. Now you have the computer, but you can do the same thing. And I'm still doing it today. When we research a class or we research a book, we always go back in and take a look at what technical articles are out there. And then we'll put it into a folder now. Every once in a while we'll run a copy off, and we'll sit there and we'll study it. And what we're doing is we're developing our expertise through somebody else's experience. Okay, but it's very valuable, because the vast majority of the time they may come up with one, two, or more significant ideas, which now I am going to incorporate in what I do in my investigations. Or they're giving me a new concept. The big one right now is this familial DNA. Man, that really and truly is the future of forensics and criminal investigations, particularly in cold cases. So I'm really getting everything I can find on this new technique. Okay, so I can develop it, and pretty soon I'm going to put it into our own classes, and I'll be able to teach it. That's one of the ways. The other way is, when I got to be a detective, I really was kind of attracted to property crimes, the burglaries and the larcenies and stuff like that. And primarily to me, when I was a young guy, was that these were really and truly the whodunits. When someone burglarizes a house, It's really a whodunit. And unlike the civilian community in the Army, if we received a reported burglary, we had to work it, and we worked it fully intending to solve and figure out what happened. So I learned early on, and what I have since started to teach my younger guys, and that is, I never learned to work a murder or a violent crime by working murders and violent crimes. I actually developed my investigative skills in my interviews and my interrogations and my use of forensic science by working the property crimes. I didn't learn them by working murders. And that's the important part. And what really became valuable later on is because when I went to these burglaries, I really paid attention to what the offender did at the scene. So then when I started working murders and homicides, I started recognizing that what was being portrayed to me at this murder scene is not what I knew burglars did at crime scenes, and it was based on my other experience. This is how we came to develop our expertise in these staged crimes. It's from all the experience that we got working these other crimes. Okay? So that's really kind of down and dirty, and I will tell you that to develop your expertise should be a never-ending task. Even today, where Grant and I are kind of doing some research right now on another book we want to write, and I recently ordered, I think, 15 or 20 books from Amazon. And I'm going to do a little bit of research and see what other people have written and see what I can either incorporate. Ooh, that's a good idea. No, that's not necessary for our books. So it should be a continuing process. And I will tell you, this is my little small office right here, and I'm looking around. I have probably 150, maybe 200 textbooks on various subjects. And when I'm presented with something that I don't know, I don't really understand, then I'll go get a couple of books to help me read up on it. And that's how you develop your expertise. You don't suddenly wake up one day and know all this stuff, okay? And you don't necessarily get it just from working these cases. You also have to do some outside stuff. So it's training, it's reading other technical articles or technical books, and then applying it. And that's how you develop your expertise. Well, I want to thank you guys very much. I hope you got something out of today. For all the practitioners, those that are seeking law enforcement training, go ahead and take a look at our website, www.secondlooktraining.com. I think you'll find some investigative courses there that will pique your interest. For everyone else, I hope to see you next time on the next edition of A Few Minutes with Detectives.